There was once a group of college students who had a meeting with the Lubavitch Rebbe. They had the opportunity to ask different questions and get their questions answered. And one of them asked, what is the purpose of a Rebbe? What is the purpose of Jewish leadership? And the Rebbe had told them that a Rebbe, Jewish leadership, is like an archaeologist. An archaeologist digs and comes up with something valuable, not just dirt. Most people who dig, if they don't know how to dig, they don't know where to dig, they're just going to come up with dirt. A Rebbe comes up with value. And the Rebbe said that Freud was not a good archaeologist. He dug into people and he came up with dirt. He came up with problems. He says, my hope is to dig into people and come up with something beautiful, to see your strengths, to see ultimately that you have a soul, that you are created in the divine image. When it comes to helping people, you want to understand them. You don't have to address problems as you can address the other version of them, the version of them that has deep, pristine value, and that's going to help. Why did Freud believe that you have to understand somebody's problem and bring that to light in order to help them? So Freud, although he was the father of psychology, he was not originally a psychologist by profession, because psychology didn't exist. He initiated it. Freud was a neurologist. He was a medical doctor. And Freud made the mistake of comparing medical health to mental or spiritual or metaphysical health, and they're not the same. When it comes to medical health, you have to understand what the issue is. You have to isolate the issue. You have to understand, maybe even have to understand its root cause, and you have to somehow address the issue. And Freud said, let's do the same thing with mental health. Let's understand what the root cause of this problem is. Let's try to address it. Let's essentially problem solve. And when you problem solve, you bring problems to light. You make those problems more relevant. You make those problems stronger many a time. What one could actually do is not just address the problem, address the part of a person's life that isn't a problem. Address the possibility rather than the problem. When you address problems, you bring problems to light. When you address possibilities, you bring that version of that person to light. You bring hope. So if a person's depressed, well, what would you rather be? Isn't that valid? Isn't what you'd rather instead of depression just as valid as your depression? I'm not saying that your depression isn't real, but what you would hope for instead is also real. Why don't we make that more relevant? If somebody's anxious, well, what would you rather experience? Isn't that what you'd rather have instead of the anxiety more meaningful than the anxiety itself? Wouldn't that equip you to face your anxiety, knowing that you have another option, you have greater possibilities? If a marriage is falling apart and there's tension in the marriage, well, what would you rather in that marriage? The premise of this is two things. Number one, if you want something, you believe you can get there because you've had it in the past. Otherwise, you wouldn't want it. You can't sample something you haven't tasted. Number two, nothing stands in the way of what you truly want. And if you could face your problems not from a vantage point of desperation, and not as a victim to trauma, a victim to depression, a victim to anxiety, a victim to addiction or a failing marriage or relationship. But if you could face your problems from a vantage point of possibility, from a vantage point of knowing that there is a part of me that is untouchable, from a part of drive and will, because I have a drive for something else, for a greater possibility, you're going to be much more equipped to deal with that issue. When clients come to me and they have a problem, I have to empathize deeply with the problem that they're going through. But what is more important in our discussion is what you want instead of the problem, the possibilities. It's not just masking the problem and let's do something else, let's distract you, take your mind off of it. But there's another version of you where the problem is less relevant, because nobody's perfect, nobody's perfectly messed up. So there's a part of you where the problem is a little bit less relevant. And why don't we explore that version of you? That's going to equip you to face your problems. When you face your angels first, you have the capacity to face your demons. When you approach issues from this vantage point, from understanding the possibilities rather than just trying to ruminate in the issue, you actually have the ability to help somebody with literally any issue, because you're helping them discover their true selves that has incredible drive. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.